He then proceeded to explain to me what those two things were. He said the first thing is that we've got to be willing to turn away from anything that we know is wrong in our lives. Now, please notice what I said was willing. There may be some things in our lives that we feel powerless to give up in our own strength. And that's okay, because God will help us with those things, as long as we're willing and want to turn away from them and say sorry to God. Are you with me? The second thing he said you've got to do to be forgiven is that you need to surrender your life to Jesus. And all surrender means is that if God made you in your mother's womb, and if God made the entire universe that surrounds you, well, don't you think God deserves to be the central person in your life? That's all surrender means. Surrender is a change of attitude where you begin to acknowledge that Jesus is God. And you start to then demonstrate that day by day by day. And put your money where your mouth is. And surrender your decisions and your choices and your time and your money and your lifestyle and your attitude. That's so hard. It's a lifelong struggle. And then the final thing he said to me was this. He said to me, Tony, everybody's got a God-shaped hole in their heart. And all of us, all of our lives, we're trying to fill this hole with so many things in our lives to get satisfaction and happiness. That's why we all work so hard and study so hard or cheat so hard to get money. But with all the money in the world, if you died tonight, what exactly would it do for you? And remember, nobody knows the day when their life will be demanded of them. Other people get turned to temporary things, quick fixes, whether it's drugs or booze or shopping. We tend to acquire things which have expiry dates, things where the effect will eventually wear off after a while. And that's why these things never really fits the God-shaped hole. All of your life, you've been put into your God-shaped hole, your world championship in Kung Fu, sex, drugs, violence, anger, even your religion. And yet the one thing you've never tried is Jesus Christ. Well, that's the only thing I could agree with, but I still wanted to beat him. But all I can say to you is that he read these verses to me from the Bible. He read these words to me from the Bible, from John chapter 8, which I want to share with you, where Jesus said these words. Jesus said in John 8:34, I tell you the truth. Everyone who sins is a slave to sin. Now, a slave has no permanent place in a family, but a son or a daughter belongs to a family forever. So if the Son of God, in other words, Jesus, if Jesus sets you free, you will be free indeed. And after reading that, I just couldn't bring myself to hitting him. The words may do nothing for you, but for me, they gripped me. They fixed me in my seat like some sort of giant behind me was fixing me down in my chair. And I was thinking to myself for the first time, well, what if I'm wrong? I was thinking about this freedom, about these two things I had to do to change my life. And all I can say to you is that Michael prayed for me at the end of that visit. I can't remember for the life of me what he prayed about. One of his usual nice prayers, but I went back into my prison, into the prison cell. Some guy burnt me on my arm with a cigarette, and when I smashed his head into a window, I nearly took his nose off him. And they locked me in my cell early that night. And all I can say to you, friends, is that I was looking for my bars on my window, and I felt so fed up looking for those bars. I was so sick of being in there. And as I looked at the bars, I suddenly noticed the shape of the bars made like a cross shape. I thought to myself, is that God trying to talk to me? What a lot of rubbish. For goodness sake, friends, seeing is believing, you know what I mean? What a lot of rubbish. And that's when I then remembered my fiancée for a minute. And Aya, she really loved me, and she believed in me so much as a person. And our relationship never depended on her eyesight. Because you see, Aya was a blind girl. She'd been blind from birth. And as I looked at those bars on the window, I just thought to myself, well, maybe it is possible to believe in something without seeing. And I looked at the cross, and I just began to speak out, and I felt very emotional, actually. It was not really me, but I looked at this cross, and I began to speak to the cross, the bars, as though it was God himself. And I just began to say, please forgive me for the people I killed. And I was crying a lot. And I began to beg God to forgive me for the people I broke in my hands. And I cried a lot more. And I begged God to forgive me for the lies and for the robberies and every stinking, sordid deed I'd ever done in my life. I prayed and prayed and prayed, but I got to be honest with you, I really meant those two things. I really meant it that night when I prayed. I decided to turn and surrender deep in my heart. I really meant to do this. And as I prayed, I didn't see anything or hear anything. It was a very dark thing in that cell, a very dark situation. But all I can say to you is this, friends. You see, I woke up the next day, and my life had changed as quick as night to day in 24 hours. Because you see, I woke up the next day in the same prison, in that same dungeon, in that same tiny little cell. And you know, I felt so different. I felt like a free man. In fact, I reckon I felt so free. I reckon I felt more free than most of you. And you decided, I hope you decided, to come here tonight. I felt more free than you. That's what I really believe. And I was behind bars. Are you hearing me? And you know what? I can't really describe it to you. It's just I felt like a free man. There was like some sort of mental, emotional, spiritual freedom I felt. A huge lift. I can't really explain it to you properly. But all I can say to you is that I was still the same Tony, but I felt so different about everything. My thoughts and my mind and my attitude began to change. I went out of my cell the next day, and you know, some other guy burnt me on this arm with a cigarette. Well, the previous night, I smashed this other guy for the window. And this guy, he burnt me, and I did take a little reaction. I was about to hit him, but I suddenly thought to myself, oh, get a block, go away. I had no time for it. And I just walked a few steps down the corridor, and I thought to myself, I should have hit him. But I thought, we don't need to. Let's leave it. He hasn't burnt me. I mean, there's no marks, so I thought, it's all right. It's okay. And I was thinking about how God forgave me last night. I got to forgive him. And it's strange because God began to change my mind so much. In fact, I decided not to do Kung Fu in that prison, which is a crazy thing to do because every day you need to watch your back. And you know, the reason why is because when I was a master, I would teach all of my students that if somebody hits you here in your face, how to defend and how to attack the person. Whereas I was reading in my Bible that Jesus said, if somebody hits you here, well, turn the cheek and give them this side too. And you know, I just felt a little bit conscious about that. And I thought to myself, it's very hard to go that direction and that direction at the same time. And I thought to myself, well, no, I'm going to continue following that guy that said, I am the way and the truth and the life, and no one comes to the Father except through me. That guy called Jesus Christ. And anyway, I could never really see Jesus doing Kung Fu anyway. So I just decided not to do it anymore. And you know, I'm not saying that it's wrong, but all I'm saying in my life, it was wrong. I feel like the alcoholic that's reformed. I don't think the alcoholic that should ever go back to drinking booze ever again. Don't even sip it. Don't even go anywhere near a pub. In the same way for me, I found I had to stay away from my addiction, which was the anger and the violence. And that's the reason why I turned my back on it. Completely. And you know what? All I can say to you is that God protected me in that prison. He protected me day by day by day, and I was the first of 10 men to become a Christian. I was the Buddhist. My friend Shane from Sri Lanka was a Hindu. Mohammed, Ahmed and Tamam were Muslims from Jordan. Andres from Cyprus. Ziggy the German. Simon from Lebanon. And 2 other friends from the Middle East. I really believe we were the 10 of the most disgusting, violent, sickening criminals you'll find. And yet we were big enough to pray to Jesus Christ, and he made us all trophies of grace. All I can say to you, friends, praise God, praise God. Friends, all I can say to you, please, absolutely, praise God. All I can say to you, though, is this. God protected me and 10 of us in there. We were all struggling. We were going through things where we had to cut away from all the baggage. It was so hard. Walking the life of a Christian in a prison like that, where you're so used to violence and just doing things in a certain way. Now trying to follow Jesus' ways. And it was really hard. But you know what? He changed us. And many of us struggled. But you know, I continued. I left the prison. All I can say to you is that I left that prison and I was sent back to England. I was sent to England because I have a British passport. And basically, I came to England and I made every effort to turn away from all my connections with my past. I was praying that God would rebuild my life, and he did. He really did. He gave me honest work where I wasn't hurting people anymore. I was doing just basic stuff. Basic work with my hands, anything from painting to being a waiter to being a security guard, anything. I was honest with my employers. I got a criminal record, but they took me on. God put a lady called Sarah in my life. And Sarah and I were married for 11 years. And she really is my best friend. And also my most trusted critic. We got 2 lovely little boys, Ethan and Jacob. Ethan is 6 and Jacob is just 3. My 6-year-old Ethan's got a lovely faith in God already. And I know that he would like me to tell you tonight that he prayed for you this evening. I saw him earlier on today, and he prays that everybody I speak to will at least take something positive from what I say and allow it to affect your life. He's only 6. What I can say to you is this, friends. God restored my life. I went to a church and, I became like a youth worker at the church. Can you imagine that, a youth worker? I was great. I mean, the young people, we had a great rapport. They always looked up to me for being a bodyguard in the past. It was great. They would listen to me when I talked to them about Jesus. I'd always want to drive in my car because I always drove a little bit faster than most. And what I can say to you is that before we were expecting our first son, Ethan, God was going to teach me the biggest lesson I've ever learned in my life so far. Because, the biggest mistake I made when I became a Christian was to think that God finished with me when he saved me. Because I now realize I'm really nothing more than a construction site. I'm a flipping building site that God's still working on, day by blooming day. And I didn't realize, God had only just begun working on my life in that prison. There was a lot of work to be done with my character. And, he's still sanding down the abrasive parts of my character and my life. And he's also chipping off some big, ugly chunks. And we're going to finish tonight with this one last chunk. I was in my car one spring night. It was a Monday night. We were living in just outside Wokingham at the time. Sarah was at home. She was pregnant. And, I finished counseling a young boy that evening. And I picked up a Chinese takeaway and I made my way home. On my way home, it was very dark and drizzly down this countryside lane, and there are many deer that would dart around the roads at this time of year, and I saw a stop sign too late. I slammed my brakes on and the wheels of my car locked and the car proceeded forward, and my car hit something that I thought was an animal, like a deer. Well, by the time the car stopped, I quickly got out and I saw nothing on the road at all. I looked, I had a broken number plate and a broken headlamp, and I figured I've hit an animal. I got back into my car and I proceeded home. That was Monday. On the Friday of that week, I had the young people at my home and we were studying in our Bibles more about God. We got our PlayStation out, played a few games and had a bit of supper. When the oldest boy came up to me making jokes about my broken number plate. He would joke about anything from the shape of my nose to my haircut, now it's my number plate. Well, he was just talking about how it happened and just pulling my legs, thinking that I got up to mischief and this sort of thing, and I just felt slightly embarrassed. They respected me so much for being a bodyguard, and bodyguards should never have accidents like this, and I felt like an idiot. Well, I did something I'm so ashamed of because I lied through my teeth to that boy. I told him, no, I just found my car like that. He then proceeded to tell me how he heard that a car was being looked, the police were looking for a car that was involved in a hit-and-run accident on Monday night, where a lady was knocked off her bike and she flew into these bushes basically and she died. And now the police are looking for a hit-and-run driver where this person has killed this lady. Well, I joked through the rest of the conversation to hurry it by, but I knew there and then, this has got to be me. He spoke about the same day and the same time and the same place, and I really felt so sick. I hurried the youth group out my home that day, really. I looked in a newspaper and I found out precisely what happened. There was a car just like ours, and this poor lady was a mother of 2 teenagers that I realized must still hate my guts because I've taken away their mum.